Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 3 team selection. As we look ahead towards Game Week 3, it's just a quick review first of Game Week 2 that we start off with, and then we jump into some of the data for Game Week 3 and what my thoughts are in terms of my plans ahead and how we plan to attack Game Week 3. As far as Game Week 2, we had 87 points, but I'd also like to take the time to shout out Stickets. It's actually a local business run in the UK. You'll find the link in the description as well, where you can find a magnetic board, and you can't see the board here because it's going to be green screened. So this was my team for Game Week 2. We scored 87 points and we're 1.77 million ranked in the world right now. So not exactly the best spot. We had to use the triple captaincy as well, but that was the team. I think the disappointment was clearly NKUNKU. He was very, very poor. And ultimately, the rest of the team, I think, delivered in terms of expectations for minutes, but the outcomes so far have been pretty bleak. Bruno Eze have been consistently blanking, have been very close to getting goals and assists, but haven't gotten them. Lewis, you can argue the same thing there, had a great chance to score, hit the crossbar, and obviously didn't get the clean sheet versus Ipswich. The rest of the team functioned pretty well. I was very happy with João Pedro because it felt like a double win. You got the minutes right with João Pedro, and you also got the goals, so the outcomes, and it doesn't really get too much better than that. I've also got NKUNKU coming in later, hopefully to sort of rotate with my team, and that's sort of how things stand. Henderson, obviously a little bit disappointing, I would say, in the lines of other players within my team that I'm not so happy about right now. And Kunku's gone. He's gone. So that's that. I'd also like to shout out Fantasy Football Hub right now. Great time to shout out their deal, which is 50% off up until the Game Week 3 deadline. They also have an offer which is to win your mini league or get your money back. It's a great tool to actually help increase your rank as an FPL manager. I think their AI team's been doing wonderful recently, so do have a look at all the sort of various tools that they have to help increase your experience as an FPL manager. As far as my own team, for Game Week 3, I clearly already made a transfer, and that was NKUNKU to Rodgers. We'll talk about that in a moment. But just looking ahead in terms of the data that we can actually expect for this game week, clearly the clean sheets aren't great across the board for some of my defenders, right? So Porro is a usual conundrum that a lot of people sort of ask questions about, who to play. Do we play Porro ahead of some of the other defenders? And I think in my situation, I have the opportunity to punt on Rico Lewis because ultimately Man City have much better odds at keeping a clean sheet versus West Ham away from home than I would say Tottenham do versus Newcastle away from home. If there's anything we can actually give credit to a relatively poor Newcastle side so far, it's the fact that the last 2 seasons, we've seen them be an incredible team at home. And I really feel like that is likely going to be the case. I do think Pedro Porro is probably going to lose his clean sheet. So I do find it as an opportunity to actually drop Porro to the bench. And I have a chance to play Lewis here, Trent Alexander-Arnold, even though he also has an away fixture that's not great, and then Konsa as well. But they're just playing versus much weaker teams in Man United and Leicester respectively. So that's why we're playing Lewis, Trent, and Konsa here. We're also going to be featuring Henderson. Ultimately, a lot of people have been asking me the question of, do we transfer Henderson out? Is he going to get a price drop? It doesn't seem like he's close to a price drop now, but it's very likely he could lose the clean sheet versus Chelsea again. What I will say, though, is I still don't see the value necessarily in moving off a goalkeeper for now. Yes, of course, some of the transfers for Crystal Palace have not been good. They've probably been negative on balance, even on defense, but it seems like they're pretty close to getting Lacroix from Wolfsburg, and it seems like at least they've gotten some replacements for some of the players that they've lost. And so I don't see the need to necessarily spend a transfer on a goalkeeper. I think Pickford is such a good example that last season where we saw a very relatively strong defense in Everton actually lose around 7 or 8 clean sheets in a row, and suddenly they went on a tear of games where I think they kept 5 clean sheets in a row. And things can change very quickly in football, even though you might not rate a team. The underlying numbers for Crystal Palace have been somewhat poor, but they haven't been extravagantly bad. And so I feel like keeping Crystal Palace defense for now is still fine with me and in my books. So that's the defense. In the midfield now, we're actually going with Saka, Rodgers, Bruno Fernandes, and Eze. So the team we're fielding out this week is definitely still 4 in the midfield, so a 3-4-3. The reason why is simply because the only one free transfer move that I've made is NKUNKU to Rodgers. And the reason why I've done NKUNKU to Rodgers is even though I plan on getting someone like Salah in the future, and I might not be able to spend all the money in the bank, is that I still think that leaving the opportunity to maybe go for someone like Son instead on Game Week 5 is still interesting, something like Saka to Son, and maybe I can still use the surplus money that I have in my team to actually upgrade another player in the short term. So that's the thoughts that I have right now. I just think that also flexibility is something that's very helpful in FPL. You never know what situations your team is going to encounter in the future. So I even have the flexibility of going for something like Saka to Palmer in one free transfer now, whereas I wouldn't have been able to do so if I just went with NKUNKU to, let's say, Madueke, or someone who is of the ilk of a 6.5. So let's say Bailey or Gibbs White. Another reason why I don't really like going to Gibbs White is, unfortunately, I don't have good rotation within this team. I've got 7 attackers. I'd have to play Gibbs White versus Liverpool, and I'd have to play Gibbs White versus Brighton. I can't rotate him, even though he has a great fixture here in Gameweek 3. The same logic applies to also some other players like Mbumo, who a lot of managers who actually have money in the bank have actually been considering. So if you go to Mbumo, he's also another very interesting transfer in, because ultimately you'd probably see Mbumo as a little bit of a long-term hold. But for me, as a wildcard 6 player, or someone who's intending to go onto wildcard 6, I just don't think Gibbs White really makes too much sense for my team. And I don't have the cash surplus to go into Mbumo. So I do like Rodgers because I feel like he's very comparable to someone like Bailey. I really enjoy the positions that he's taking up so far. I enjoy the amount of minutes he's been playing. And yes, of course, whilst Champions League is around the corner, I still think that he's going to be a very valuable asset going forward. So that's why I've gone for Rodgers, and I'm very confident in him ultimately, because you're spending not too much money. The fixture run is incredible for Aston Villa. So if we just quickly run off the games between Game Weeks 3 to 10, I mean, even though I'm actually looking at a Game Week 6 wildcard, we're talking about, at least in the short term, Leicester away, Everton at home, and then Wolves at home. So you can't really get much better than that. Wolves recently have actually looked like a pretty strong offensive team, but on the back, or on defense, they look really poor. Same goes with Everton as well, which last season we sort of associated as a really strong defense. So those are my sort of early thoughts. The reason why I'm keeping Bruno ultimately is because I don't see a transfer that's really worth a hit for him. I can't, for example, go straight to Palmer. So unlike some other managers, you know, that could have been an interesting 2 free transfer opportunity. But Bruno stays within the team, and hopefully I'll get him versus Southampton, which is going to be a much better fixture, even though the short term is obviously going to be a Liverpool game, and it's not exactly so great. With Eze, it's a similar situation where you have the worst fixture here with Chelsea, but then still Game Weeks 4 and 5, in my opinion, are very strong for Eze, and I have no doubt really in his ability to be a good FPL asset. I think even on wildcard 6, it's very likely that I could actually still have him within my team. And with Saka, it's a similar situation where he's sort of in that sunspot where, if you look at the Everton fixture last week, the next 2 games after that weren't so great, right? It was Newcastle away and something like Arsenal. For Saka, it's the same situation where you've got Brighton, and then suddenly you've got 2 somewhat poor fixtures, right? It's Tottenham and then Man City. So I see Saka as either a Game Week 4 or 5 transfer, particularly since I'm going to wildcard 6 and bring him back into my team. But yeah, Saka's going to stay within my team because I think he's just a great pick here for Game Week 3. In the front line, we're going to go with João Pedro, Haaland, and Isak. The nice thing that is about going for João Pedro for this week is ultimately, look, I have to play him, but also I still don't own Arsenal defense. So it feels like I'm continuing to bet against Arsenal defense, and it hasn't worked out so far. Players like Raya, Gabriel have done incredibly in terms of points. I think Arsenal have been a bit fortunate with the 2 clean sheets so far. Mostly they've been bailed out by Raya's heroics and his fantastic shot stopping, so credit to him. But usually what we associate from a top level defense is clearly just reducing the amount of chances that they concede. And so far, they've actually conceded a lot of chances. Whereas if I compare them to Liverpool, for example, Liverpool have conceded a lot less sort of high quality chances versus their opposition. So early signs for Liverpool defense actually look incredible. And they look like a really good team. But I'm sure Arsenal defense will remain very, very strong for the course of the season. I've been talking about them being the best defense in the world for maybe a year now. And still things look exactly like they are for Arsenal. I wouldn't expect too much. And of course, the early game sample size is very, very limited. So no need to overreact onto that, but I just hope that they lose a few clean sheets just for the sake of my own FPL team. For Haaland, he's going to be my captaincy option for this week. I think it's very close between Haaland and Saka. I just like the fact that he's playing versus West Ham. He looks fantastic so far. It seems like some of the big guns might actually come back into play for this fixture, so that's obviously an added boost to Man City. And yeah, ultimately it's an away fixture versus a home fixture for Saka, but I would like to back Haaland here. The market odds sort of goal projections for him are absolutely sky high once again. So I just really like the fact that you can just go with the Haaland captaincy. And that's sort of the bet that I'm going on with the wildcard 6, where I might drop Haaland on wildcard 6, but for now, he's going to be in my team and he's going to be my captain for the next 2 foreseeable weeks. As far as Isak, he has an amazing fixture as well. He's got Tottenham at home. And I feel like, yes, of course, the early performance so far for Isak has been very poor, but it's 2 game weeks of data. They did play 10 versus 11 for one of the games. And ultimately, I haven't soured too much off of Isak, right? He's still someone who I think is going to be extremely productive over the course of the season. So I'm happy to still own him, albeit a little bit reluctantly since he hasn't gotten any points. But that can be applied to Bruno. That can be applied to Eze. At least all these players are playing 80 to 90 minutes consistently, and they have routes and avenues to get FPL points in the future. And that's why they're still in our FPL team. And that's going to be my Game Week 3 team selection. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoy the Game Week 3 team selection. Let me know what your transfer plans are for this week. In the future, I think what I would say for my own team is for game weeks 4 and 5, there's a lot of moves to make, right? Either it's routes towards Son, to Palmer, to Salah. With the money in the bank, I have the flexibility now. I also probably need to consider whether I want to keep Haaland for game week 5, because if I ever want to make a double free transfer move to get towards someone like Salah or Palmer as well, it might be plausible that I actually move out of someone like Saka, because on game week 5 when Arsenal play versus Man City, I think that's a very good window to actually not own both of those assets. And so if it makes sense for me to actually go off of Haaland, I probably will actually do so, just because I can wildcard him back in. But there might be some team value aspects of things that I'll probably look towards in the future to sort of reconsider what my true evaluation will be going forwards. But thank you guys so much for watching. As I said, once again, I'll see you guys in the next video.